Do you want something from me too, cowboy? The Arapaho girl's quiet question. The sun was just beginning to rise over the rolling plains, painting the sky in gentle shades of orange and pink. A soft wind moved across the tall grasses, bending them in waves that looked like the sea on a quiet morning. The air smelled fresh, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and damp earth. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called, its song sharp and clear against the quiet of the early hour. It was in this stillness that a lone cowboy appeared on the horizon, his silhouette outlined against the rising sun. Dust rose from the hooves of his horse as he rode steadily toward a small gathering at the edge of a forest. He was not a hurried man, but the rhythm of the horse's walk suggested he had traveled many miles. His clothes were worn, patched in places, and his hat shaded his face, hiding the story of his eyes. Yet there was something in the way he carried himself, a careful respect for the land he crossed, a quiet patience that marked him as different from those who traveled only to conquer or claim. In his saddlebag, a few small items were neatly wrapped: a piece of cloth, some dried meat, and a small, carefully made trinket that he had picked up from a town earlier in his journey. It was meant to be a gift, a small bridge between his world and the one he was about to enter. Among the Arapaho people who had made their temporary camp near the forest's edge, a young girl noticed him first. She stood slightly apart from the others, her dark eyes watching the approach of the lone rider. She was quiet by nature, thoughtful and observant, and she had learned early in life that it was safer to watch before speaking. Her hair was tied back simply, and her clothing was made from soft hides, stitched carefully by her mother. Her hands rested lightly on a small bundle of berries she had collected, but she did not move toward the man. Instead, she stayed in the shadows, curious but cautious. The cowboy slowed as he neared the camp, raising a hand in a gesture of peace. The horse snorted softly, shifting its weight as if sensing the tension in the air. He spoke a few words in a low, gentle voice, offering greetings to those he saw, though his words were careful, respectful, never demanding. Some of the adults in the camp watched him with suspicion, their faces set and wary, while children peeked from behind blankets, unsure whether this visitor meant harm or was simply a traveler seeking rest. The young girl stepped slightly forward, then, unsure whether she wanted to reveal herself. Something about the man, the calm way he moved, the way he seemed to watch without judging, made her heart beat a little faster. She could not put her thoughts into words, but she felt a mixture of curiosity and caution that tugged at her like the wind tugged at the grasses around her. He carried no weapons in sight, only the small bag on his side, and there was a gentleness in his posture that contrasted sharply with the hard, harsh travelers she had heard about in stories. The cowboy dismounted slowly, keeping his movements smooth and deliberate, careful not to startle the girl or anyone else in the camp. His boots made soft prints in the dirt as he approached a small fire where an older woman was tending the morning meal. He nodded politely, offering a soft smile. From his bag, he took the small trinket he had brought, holding it out in a gesture of goodwill. It was simple, a carved wooden figure, small and unassuming, yet made with skill and care. The woman looked at him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. She had learned to be cautious of strangers, to judge by actions rather than words. She accepted the gift with a nod, though she did not speak. Around them, the camp seemed to hold its breath. The young girl watched every detail, the way the man's hands moved, the careful attention in his eyes, the respect he showed for the space and the people. Something stirred inside her, a feeling she could not yet name, a mixture of curiosity and a strange sense of recognition. After offering the gift, the cowboy stepped back, his eyes briefly meeting those of the girl. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. He did not speak immediately, only looked, and in that look there was an unspoken understanding. He was a visitor, yes, but he seemed to see them as people, not obstacles or opportunities. The girl felt a small warmth spread in her chest, a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, this encounter could be different. She did not move closer, yet she did not step back either. Her hands stayed relaxed at her sides, but her mind raced with questions she could not yet voice. He spoke then, his voice soft but carrying clearly in the morning air. He asked simple questions, not intrusive, about the camp, about the people, about the land itself. The adults answered politely, keeping their words measured, but the young girl listened carefully to every sound. She noticed how he reacted not just to their words, but to their actions. The way he watched the fire, the way he nodded when a child handed him water, the small, respectful gestures that spoke louder than language. The hours passed slowly, the sun climbing higher into the sky. The cowboy stayed near the edge of the camp, not imposing himself, yet making his presence known. He offered small gifts to the children, stones polished smooth, a small piece of cloth, a few sweets he had carried in his pack. The young girl watched, fascinated by the reactions of the younger ones, how they laughed and whispered, their joy simple and unguarded. She felt a pang of longing, a wish to reach out, to understand more, yet she held herself back, remembering the lessons she had learned from her family about caution and trust. Finally, as the day warmed and the wind shifted, he turned toward the girl directly. There was a hesitation, a careful pause, as if he were choosing his words with care. He reached into his bag again and produced a small item, simple but meaningful. He held it out, not demanding, not pleading, only offering. The girl's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, she stepped forward. Her hands reached out cautiously, taking the gift without a word, her fingers brushing against his briefly. In that touch, brief though it was, there was a connection, a quiet acknowledgement that both of them recognized the significance of this simple act. The cowboy smiled faintly, a hint of relief and understanding in his eyes. He did not push for conversation, did not try to force familiarity. He waited patiently, giving her space to decide how much to reveal, how much to trust. Around them the camp continued its rhythm, the crackle of the fire, the soft murmur of voices, the sound of horses shifting in their stalls. But in that moment, it felt as if the world had narrowed, focused entirely on the exchange between the girl and the cowboy. She looked at him quietly, her dark eyes thoughtful, measuring, trying to understand what had brought him here, why he had chosen this path. He seemed different from the other men who passed through, those who came with greed or fear or harshness. There was no hurry in him, no need to claim or conquer. He seemed content simply to be here, to observe, to respect. And in that simple truth, the girl found herself intrigued, her heart and mind opening just a fraction to the possibility of something new. As the sun climbed higher, the cowboy prepared to move on, knowing that his journey could not wait forever. He gave a small nod, a quiet gesture of farewell, and the girl, after a long moment of hesitation, nodded in return. No words were spoken between them, yet the moment was charged with meaning. The trinket she now held was more than just a gift. It was a symbol, small but powerful, of a bridge between two worlds, two ways of life, and two hearts that had briefly touched in understanding. The cowboy mounted his horse slowly, glancing back one last time. The girl watched him go, her eyes following the dust trail left by his departing horse. A mixture of sadness and anticipation stirred within her, sadness that he would not stay, anticipation for the possibility that their paths might cross again. She clutched the small gift tightly, feeling its weight not just in her hand but in her mind and heart. It was a beginning, quiet and unassuming, yet full of promise. The plains returned to their usual rhythm, the wind moving through the grass, the birds singing, the camp resuming its daily life. Yet for the young girl, something had shifted. The world felt a little larger, a little more connected, and the presence of the cowboy lingered like a soft echo in her thoughts. She did not yet know what the future held, or what this encounter might lead to, but she knew that she would remember it always. And somewhere in the distance, the lone rider continued on his journey, carrying with him a quiet memory of a girl who had watched, waited, and offered trust in a small, profound gesture. The morning after the cowboy had left, the young girl could not stop thinking about him. She walked along the edge of the camp, her small hands brushing against the tall grasses, the trinket he had given her clutched tightly in her palm. The carved wooden figure felt heavier than it was, not in weight, but in meaning. She had held it once, briefly, when he had offered it, and in that short moment she had felt something stir inside her, a strange mixture of curiosity, caution, and hope. The camp had returned to its usual rhythm. Women prepared meals over open fires, carefully stirring pots of corn and dried meat, while children ran between the tents and horses, their laughter carrying across the morning air. Men repaired tools, tended to the horses, and arranged supplies for the day. All around her, life moved on, yet she felt disconnected from it, her thoughts fixed on the memory of the cowboy's presence. She remembered how carefully he had moved, how his eyes had watched without judging, and how gently he had offered his gift. There was a calm in him, a quiet respect that she had never seen in the men who sometimes passed through their lands. She had tried to speak to her mother about him, to describe the feeling of that brief encounter, but the words felt inadequate. "He is just a traveler," her mother said. "Do not think too much of him. He will pass, as all travelers do." But the girl could not help thinking that he was different. She had observed him closely, noticing how he listened to others without interrupting, how he did not demand, and how he carried himself as if the land belonged to no one but him, in a way that was neither careless nor cruel. By mid-morning, the cowboy returned. He had not been gone long, but something in the girl's heart lifted when she saw the familiar silhouette in the distance. He rode slowly this time, clearly aware of the camp's presence, and dismounted at the edge, keeping a respectful distance. The adults watched cautiously, their hands hovering near their tools, their eyes sharp. The children, curious and brave, peered out from behind blankets and tents, whispering to each other about the man who seemed different from any they had seen. The young girl stepped forward, her small feet making soft prints in the dirt. She did not speak at first, unsure what words could capture the mix of curiosity and caution she felt. The cowboy noticed her and smiled faintly, nodding in recognition. It was a small gesture, but it held weight. He carried no weapons, only the same soft, careful presence as before. In his hands he held nothing, offering only his attention, and perhaps, without even realizing it, his patience. She watched him for a moment. Then, as if pushed by an inner force she could not name, she asked the question that had been forming in her mind since their first meeting. "Do you want something from me too, cowboy?" Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper carried on the wind, but it reached him clearly. There was no anger or accusation in her tone, only a quiet caution, a question born of observation and experience. She had seen men come and go, sometimes taking more than they gave, sometimes causing harm to her people. Her words were a test, a gentle measure of his intentions. The cowboy froze briefly, taken aback not by the question itself, but by the weight it carried. He understood immediately what she meant. He knelt slightly in the dirt, lowering himself to her level, so that she would not feel threatened. "No," he said softly, "I do not want anything from you, except perhaps to know you are safe and well." His words were honest, but it was the tone, gentle and careful, that mattered more. He made no sudden movements, no gestures that might alarm her. His eyes met hers fully, and in that look there was a quiet promise of respect. She studied him, her dark eyes searching for any hint of deceit. Seeing none, she allowed herself to relax slightly, her hands loosening their grip on the trinket he had given her. Still, she did not step forward. Not yet. There was trust, yes, but it was fragile, like a thin layer of ice over a river that could break if handled carelessly. She wanted to test him further, to see if his patience and respect would hold under closer scrutiny. Over the next hours, the cowboy stayed at the edge of the camp. He offered small gifts to the children again, simple items that brought delight and laughter. He watched the adults work, moving quietly, offering help when it was needed but never imposing. The girl observed all of this, noticing the subtle differences between him and the other men who sometimes came through their land. Where others demanded or assumed, he waited. Where others took without thought, he offered without expectation. She felt a strange admiration growing inside her, mixed with curiosity about who he really was and why he was different. At one point, he approached a small stream nearby to wash his hands and face. The girl followed at a distance, not out of fear, but out of interest. She noticed the care he took not to disturb the water, not to trample the banks, not to take more than he needed. Even in this simple act, there was a respect that she had not seen before. It made her wonder about the world outside her camp, about the places he had been, and the choices he had made along the way. The cowboy noticed her presence, but did not speak immediately. Instead, he gestured gently toward the water, inviting her to approach if she wished. It was a small, unassuming gesture, but it carried meaning, a way of showing trust without forcing it. She stepped closer slowly, holding the trinket tightly in one hand, and watched as he dipped his hands into the stream. The cool water reflected the sunlight, creating small patterns that danced across the sand and stones. For a few moments, neither spoke. They simply existed in the same space, connected by the quiet rhythm of the natural world around them. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you here?" she asked, her eyes never leaving his. There was no judgment in her tone, only curiosity. She wanted to understand him, to know why he had chosen to enter their world with such care, why he had offered gifts instead of demands. The cowboy paused, thinking carefully before answering. "I travel," he said simply. "I have been many places, seen many things, but when I come here, I try to leave what I do not own behind. I bring only what I can give without harm." His words were honest, and the way he spoke them carried a quiet humility. He did not speak as someone wiser or stronger, only as someone who had learned to observe and respect. The girl listened, her mind absorbing each word. She considered the truth in what he said, recognizing that his actions matched his words. There was a consistency, a harmony between who he was and what he did. It made her heart lift slightly, a feeling she could not fully explain. She felt that perhaps she had found someone who could understand, even in small ways, the values she had been taught since childhood: respect for the land, care for others, patience, and honesty. As the sun climbed higher, he remained near the stream, occasionally helping children fetch water or carrying small loads for the adults when asked. The girl watched him work, noting the careful way he handled each task, the patience in his movements, the quiet respect he showed for the people around him. She began to see him not as a stranger, but as a presence that could be trusted, even if only slightly. When it was time for him to leave again, he turned to the girl and offered a small smile, a silent acknowledgement of their shared morning. She clutched the trinket, her fingers tightening around it, feeling a strange connection that went beyond words. For the first time, she felt a small spark of hope that perhaps the world could contain people like him, travelers who did not take, who did not harm, who could exist alongside her people without causing fear or pain. She asked him one final question before he mounted his horse again, her voice soft but steady. "Will you come back?" she asked. It was not just a question of curiosity, but a quiet wish for continuity, for trust to grow in a world where strangers often brought only danger. The cowboy paused, looking at her with eyes that reflected understanding and kindness. "If the road leads me here again, I will," he said simply. His words were not a promise, not a guarantee, only an honest reflection of the uncertainty of life and travel. Yet in that answer there was a sense of hope, a bridge between their worlds that had been quietly built through small acts of patience and respect. As he rode away, the girl remained at the edge of the stream, holding the trinket tightly, her thoughts swirling with the events of the day. She had asked her question, and he had answered with honesty and care. In that answer, she had found a seed of trust, a beginning of something that might grow if nurtured carefully. She looked out across the plains, the wind rustling the grasses, the sun warm on her face, and felt a quiet sense of connection to the world beyond her camp. Though the cowboy had left again, the memory of his presence stayed with her, echoing in the quiet spaces of her mind. She knew that encounters like this were rare, and that trust was something to be given cautiously. But she also knew that she had experienced something meaningful, a gentle reminder that not all who wandered into her world brought harm, and that some travelers could bring understanding, patience, and care instead. Days passed since the cowboy's last visit, yet the young girl found herself thinking about him constantly. The trinket he had given her rested carefully on a small cloth inside her tent, its carved lines catching the light in a way that seemed almost alive. She touched it often, feeling the smooth wood under her fingers, and each time her thoughts returned to him, the way he moved, the way he spoke, the quiet respect he showed to everything around him. Life in the camp continued as usual. The women prepared meals, cleaned and sewed, their hands moving with skill and experience. The children played, chased each other around the horses, and laughed freely, filling the air with sounds of joy. The men hunted, repaired tools, and guided the horses, their presence steady and grounding. Yet, for the girl, the rhythm of the camp felt slightly different now. Everything seemed sharper, more noticeable. She saw patterns she had not noticed before, how the sun reflected off the river, how the wind shifted direction when clouds gathered, how a horse shifted its weight when it sensed something unfamiliar. It was as if the memory of the cowboy had made her senses more alert, more aware of the small details of life around her. One morning, as the mist lifted from the grass and the sun painted the sky in soft gold, she noticed a figure on the horizon. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly moved to a higher spot near the edge of the camp, where she could observe without being immediately seen. It was him, the cowboy, approaching at a slow, careful pace, his hat low to shield his face from the rising sun. He did not rush, and he did not make any sudden movements. The horse's hooves barely kicked up dust as he came closer, and the girl felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness she could not easily name. He dismounted at the edge of the camp, keeping his distance as if respecting the space of the people living there. Some of the adults noticed him immediately and cast wary glances, but he did not seem concerned. He greeted them quietly, speaking with a tone that was calm and non-threatening. The young girl watched every movement, every gesture, analyzing them carefully. She wanted to understand if this time would be different. She wanted to know if he had truly come with respect, or if the first visit had been a passing act of politeness. Slowly, she stepped out from behind the tall grasses and approached him. Her eyes studied him carefully, looking for honesty in his expression, for kindness in his movements. The cowboy noticed her approach and nodded slightly, a gentle acknowledgement that did not demand anything. He placed his hands at his sides, open and relaxed, a silent gesture of peace. She remembered the words she had asked him last time, and this time, the question felt heavier, more necessary. She looked at him directly and said softly, "Do you want something from me too, cowboy?" Her voice was calm, yet beneath it was a depth of meaning that only someone who had seen too much in life could understand. She did not accuse, she only asked. It was a test, a measure of trust, and a question that needed an honest answer. The cowboy paused, his eyes reflecting the early sunlight. He knelt down slightly, lowering himself to her level so that she would not feel intimidated. "No," he said gently, "I do not want anything from you. I only want to know that you and your people are safe and that I can leave behind something good, not harm." His voice was steady, and the way he spoke carried truth. He did not make sudden movements or gestures that might frighten her. His hands were empty, his heart open, and his presence calm. She considered his words, studying him carefully. There was honesty in the tone, in the careful way he moved, in the patience he displayed. She had seen men come and go, men who demanded, men who took, men who left destruction behind without thinking. But he seemed different. He moved with awareness. He spoke with respect, and he seemed to notice the world in a way that was gentle, almost reverent. As the morning wore on, he began to interact with the camp more naturally. He helped where he could, carrying small loads for the adults, assisting with the children, and always careful not to interfere with the routines of the people. The young girl observed him closely. Every time he moved, every gesture, every word, she studied, learning more about him than she could have imagined. She began to see not just a traveler, but someone who chose his actions carefully, someone who had the patience to watch before acting and the courage to act gently when necessary. During the afternoon, he approached the small fire where some of the women were preparing food. He offered to help, and they allowed it. Curious about his abilities, he stirred the pot carefully, measured portions of ingredients with precision, and cleaned the area when he was finished. There was no boastfulness in his actions, no expectation of praise, only careful, honest effort. The young girl noticed the subtle smiles of approval from the women, the trust that slowly grew around him, and she felt a quiet respect blossom in her own heart. Later, he took a small piece of cloth from his saddlebag and began to weave a simple pattern, showing the children how to fold and tie it. The children watched eagerly, and their laughter rang out across the camp. She observed quietly, her heart warming at the sight. It was a small, simple act, yet it carried a sense of connection. He was teaching without dominating, guiding without controlling. For the young girl, it was a lesson she did not need words to understand. Respect and patience could create bonds stronger than words alone. As the sun began to lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the cowboy noticed the girl standing apart. Watching quietly, he walked toward her slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished. When he reached her, he knelt again, placing himself at her level. "You asked me something the last time I was here," he said softly. "You wanted to know if I wanted something from you. I hope my actions have answered that question." The girl considered his words carefully. She nodded slowly, her eyes studying him intently. She realized that he had indeed shown her the truth in his actions, the honesty in his presence, and the respect in his words. She felt a small, quiet trust growing, the kind that did not demand, the kind that could endure even the uncertainties of the world around them. For the next few hours, they remained near each other, sharing quiet moments. Sometimes they watched the children play. Sometimes they simply sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the camp and the soft rustle of the wind through the tall grass. In these moments, the young girl discovered a new way of understanding. She realized that trust was not only given by words, but by patience, consistency, and small, thoughtful actions. She also saw that courage was not always loud or bold. It could be quiet, gentle, and steady, just like the cowboy who had come into their camp and stayed with respect and care. As the day came to an end, the cowboy prepared to leave once more. The young girl stepped forward and offered him a small smile, a gesture that carried more meaning than words ever could. He smiled back, tipping his hat slightly, acknowledging the connection they had built in this short time. "If I can come again, I will," he said softly, his voice steady. "If the road leads me here, I will return." She watched him mount his horse and ride slowly toward the horizon, the setting sun casting long shadows across the plains. The dust trail left by the horse seemed to linger, a reminder of the moments they had shared, the trust that had grown, and the quiet understanding that existed between them. She clutched the trinket in her hand, feeling its weight, feeling the meaning it carried, and feeling the possibility that the world could contain people who moved through it with care, respect, and honesty. After he disappeared from sight, she returned to the camp, her steps lighter than before. Though the day had ended, the memory of his presence remained, echoing in her mind. She thought of the small acts of kindness, the gentle guidance, the quiet patience, and the honesty he had shown. It had been a simple day in the life of the camp, yet it had changed something within her. She realized that trust, patience, and respect could create connections stronger than fear, suspicion, or distance. That night, as she lay in her tent, the trinket resting beside her, she thought of him again. She wondered where his travels would take him next, what people he would meet, and how he would continue to move through the world with the same quiet honesty she had witnessed. She felt a sense of hope, small but persistent, that perhaps in this vast and sometimes difficult world there were people who acted with care, who respected life, and who moved through it with a gentle courage that could make a difference. The stars appeared above the camp, twinkling softly against the dark sky. The wind rustled through the trees and tall grasses, carrying the scents of the earth, of fire, and of life itself. The young girl held the trinket close, feeling its presence as a reminder of the connection she had begun to form, of the trust that could grow, and of the lessons she had learned in a single day. That respect could be stronger than fear, that patience could be a bridge, and that even a quiet gesture could carry more meaning than many words. The days after the cowboys' visits were quieter than usual. The camp had settled back into its rhythm, yet an unease lingered in the air. The young girl noticed it first. The wind that once felt gentle now seemed sharper, rustling the grasses in warning. The birdsong carried differently, more urgent, as though the land itself was whispering a caution. She could sense a tension she could not fully name, a shadow stretching just beyond the camp's warmth. It began subtly at first. Travelers appeared on the horizon, small groups of men who moved with the certainty of ownership, not the quiet respect she had seen in the cowboy. Their horses kicked up dust as they rode, their voices loud, and their manner commanding. They carried bundles, tools, and sometimes weapons, though it was unclear what they intended. The adults of the camp noticed immediately, their faces tightening with worry. The men prepared themselves, checking bows and knives, whispering instructions to one another. Even the children sensed it, pausing in their play, watching cautiously from behind the safety of the tents. The young girl watched from the edge of the camp, her eyes searching for any sign of danger. She clutched the trinket the cowboy had given her, holding it tightly, feeling its smooth surface under her fingers. It had become more than a simple gift. It was a reminder of what she had learned about patience, trust, and quiet courage. Yet she knew that not every person could be trusted. Her instincts told her that the newcomers were different from him, that their intentions might not align with the harmony of her people. As the men drew closer, the tension grew. One of the elders spoke firmly, directing the camp to maintain a calm presence. "Do not provoke," he said. "Observe, and only act if necessary. They may not mean harm, but we must be ready." The words carried weight, yet they did not ease the girl's concern. She could see the cautious movements of the adults, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon. The wind carried the scent of the approaching travelers, mingled with dust and the faint metallic smell of tools. The cowboy appeared again at this moment, riding slowly toward the camp. He had sensed the disturbance from afar, and his approach was careful. He dismounted at the edge, observing both the camp and the newcomers with steady, measured eyes. The young girl noticed immediately how his presence seemed to calm some of the tension. He did not rush forward, did not demand attention, but his quiet confidence seemed to reassure the adults. His hands rested loosely at his sides, his gaze calm and aware. The newcomers dismounted with loud movements, their voices carrying over the tall grasses. They called out, asking questions about the camp, the land, and the people. Some words were polite, but their tone hinted at expectation rather than curiosity. The adults of the camp responded carefully, choosing words that conveyed respect without revealing vulnerability. The girl listened, noticing every detail, the way the men moved, the way they watched, the way they gestured toward the camp. There was an intensity in their presence, a kind of urgency that was absent from the cowboy's demeanor. The young girl felt a tightening in her chest. She had seen enough of the world to understand that not all travelers came with good intentions. She thought of the cowboy, his gentle presence, and how he had never demanded, never forced, never taken more than necessary. In contrast, these newcomers carried an energy that made her wary. She realized that the peace of the camp could be threatened if caution was not maintained. The cowboy stepped closer to the girl, lowering himself slightly to her level, as he had done before. "Stay calm," he whispered, though his voice carried enough to be heard only by her. "Watch carefully. Nothing happens without reason, but be ready to move if you must." His words were steady, a quiet guidance that reminded her of the lessons he had taught without speaking directly. She nodded, her dark eyes wide and focused, understanding that her role now was to observe, to protect what she could, and to trust the judgment of those who had lived on this land for years. The newcomers began to approach the camp, their movements deliberate and loud. They seemed to examine everything: the arrangement of tents, the location of the fire, the paths the horses took. Some of them carried small tools, perhaps for trade, perhaps for work. But the girl could not read their intentions clearly. She noticed the subtle shifts in the adults' behavior: hands on tools, eyes narrowing, a soft whisper passing from one to another. She felt a prickle of fear, yet it was tempered by the memory of the cowboy's patience, and the calm way he had always moved. Suddenly, one of the travelers reached for a small bundle of food that had been left out for the morning meal. A woman from the camp stepped forward quickly, raising her voice in warning. The traveler paused, looking surprised, then laughed lightly, brushing off the woman's concern. The tension in the air thickened, and the girl felt a surge of adrenaline. She gripped the trinket tightly, as if its presence could protect her from what might come next. The cowboy moved forward slightly but carefully. He did not push or command, only positioned himself between the newcomers and the camp. His gaze was firm, and his voice, though calm, carried authority. "There is no need for haste or harm," he said clearly. "This camp is not a threat. Respect it, and you will leave in peace." His words were steady, and his presence was strong without being aggressive. The young girl watched, amazed at how his calm confidence could influence the tension around him. For a moment, the travelers seemed to hesitate. They exchanged glances, perhaps considering his words or measuring the resolve in his eyes. One of them, a taller man with a sharp gaze, stepped forward slightly, testing the cowboy's patience. "We are only passing through," he said, his tone less certain than before. "We mean no harm." The cowboy nodded once, acknowledging the statement. Yet he did not lower his guard. His hands remained loose at his sides, ready if needed, but his eyes never left the group. The young girl felt a mixture of relief and continued worry. She realized that the situation could change in an instant. She observed the children who were quietly being guided to safer spots by their mothers, and the adults who were maintaining a careful watch. Everything depended on patience, awareness, and the ability to act when necessary. She thought of the lessons the cowboy had demonstrated: calmness in the face of uncertainty, respect for life, and the quiet courage to protect without aggression. As the day wore on, the travelers seemed to accept the cowboy's guidance. They kept their distance, spoke only when necessary, and eventually began to move past the camp, their curiosity satisfied but their intentions unclear. The tension slowly eased, though the air still carried a residual caution. The young girl exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the day lift slightly. She had learned something important. Danger could come without warning, but patience, observation, and respect could prevent it from turning into disaster. The cowboy turned to the girl, his gaze softening. "You did well," he said quietly. "You watched, you understood, and you stayed calm. That is more courage than many people show." She felt a warmth in her chest at his words, a mixture of pride and relief. She understood that courage was not always loud or visible. Sometimes it was the quiet vigilance that kept others safe, the patience that allowed understanding to guide action. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the plains, the cowboy prepared to leave. He mounted his horse slowly, glancing back at the camp one last time. The young girl stepped forward, holding the trinket tightly, her eyes meeting his. "Will you come back?" she asked softly, echoing the question she had asked before. He nodded, a small smile on his face. "If the road leads me here, I will return. And if I can, I will bring what helps, not what harms." His words were simple, yet they carried the weight of experience, honesty, and respect. She nodded, understanding that his presence had been a shield as well as a guide, a reminder that kindness and patience could hold power in a world that often seemed uncertain. As he rode away, the girl watched the dust trail disappear into the horizon, feeling both relief and a lingering awareness of the fragility of peace. She understood now that even in calm moments, the world could shift unexpectedly. Yet she also knew that courage, patience, and respect could guide them through the challenges that arose. She clutched the trinket, feeling its smooth surface, and felt a small but steady spark of hope that not all travelers brought harm, that some carried understanding, and that sometimes the quiet courage of one person could protect many. The camp slowly settled for the night. The children were guided to their blankets, the adults kept watch in shifts, and the fire burned steadily, a symbol of life and warmth. The young girl sat quietly, reflecting on the day. She realized that she had learned something profound, that respect and vigilance could coexist, that courage did not always roar, and that careful observation could be as powerful as any weapon. Outside, the stars appeared one by one, twinkling in the dark sky. The wind moved through the tall grasses, carrying the scents of the earth, the fire, and life itself. The young girl held the trinket close, feeling its presence as a reminder of the lessons of the day, that courage, patience, and respect were stronger than fear, and that even in the face of tension, understanding and care could guide action. The days after the visitors had passed were quiet, but full of reflection. The young girl walked along the edge of the camp as the sun rose, the tall grasses swaying gently in the morning breeze. She held the small wooden trinket the cowboy had given her, turning it over in her hands as she remembered all that had happened. The events of the past days felt like a lesson unfolding slowly, lessons about trust, respect, patience, and courage. Every glance she cast across the plains seemed different now. Every sound in the wind carried meaning. Every movement of the horses or the children held significance. Her mind returned to the cowboy and his presence. He had been gentle, careful, and patient. He had shown her what it meant to act with respect, to move through the world with awareness, and to protect without causing harm. She understood that not every person could be trusted, but she also realized that some people could bring goodness, guidance, and understanding simply by being mindful of others. The trinket in her hand reminded her of him and the quiet connection they had begun. As she walked, she noticed a distant shape on the horizon. Her heart quickened with recognition. The cowboy was returning. He rode slowly, aware of the camp's presence, his movements deliberate and unhurried. She could see the calm in his posture, the steady rhythm of his horse's hooves, and the patience in the way he scanned the camp as he approached. The adults noticed him too, their expressions softening slightly at the sight of someone they now trusted, though they remained cautious, prepared for anything. He dismounted at the edge of the camp, keeping his distance as always, and gave a small, respectful nod to the adults. The young girl stepped forward, carefully clutching the trinket. This time she felt a mix of curiosity and confidence. She had observed him over several visits, learned from his actions, and had seen how he handled tension with patience and understanding. Her question from before, the one she had asked quietly, "Do you want something from me too, cowboy?" still lingered in her mind, but now she understood more about what trust and connection could mean. The cowboy approached her slowly, lowering himself to her level, as he always did. He studied her quietly, as if reading the thoughts in her eyes without speaking. "I've returned," he said softly. "I hope to see you, and to know that all is well here." His voice was gentle, carrying calm and sincerity. The young girl looked at him, sensing the honesty in his words, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel hope. She spoke carefully, her voice steady but soft. "We are safe. The camp is safe. But I have been thinking about the world, and about people, and about trust." She paused, searching for the right words. "You have shown me what respect can look like. You have shown me patience. And I think I understand now that courage can be quiet, not loud, but still it can protect and guide." The cowboy nodded slowly, understanding the depth of her words. "You are wise," he said gently. "You have watched, you have listened, and you have learned. Sometimes the quietest actions carry the most power. You have grown stronger in ways you may not even notice." His eyes reflected warmth, respect, and a subtle pride in her understanding. The young girl felt a small surge of courage. She realized that their connection had been more than passing curiosity. It had been a bridge between two worlds: the world of her people, rooted in tradition and care for the land, and the world of travelers, wide and unpredictable, yet capable of respect and thoughtfulness. She turned the trinket in her hands, thinking about what it symbolized: a reminder that understanding and kindness could travel far, even across the unknown. The cowboy reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a few simple gifts: some dried fruit, a small cloth, and a polished stone. He offered them to the girl, not with expectation, but as a gesture of goodwill. She accepted them carefully, noticing the care in the way he handled each item. She realized that these were more than gifts. They were symbols of connection, of thoughtfulness, and of trust that he had chosen to extend to her and her people. As they shared a quiet moment near the edge of the camp, the sounds of daily life continued around them. The laughter of children, the soft conversation of adults, the steady lowing of horses. The young girl understood that life moved on, that peace could be fragile, but that respect and understanding could strengthen it. She felt a calm certainty that the lessons of patience, observation, and careful action were worth more than words, and that these lessons could guide her through future challenges. Later in the afternoon, the cowboy assisted with some small tasks, helping to carry water and guiding the children in simple games that encouraged cooperation and attention. The young girl watched closely, learning once more from his actions. She observed the way he spoke to others with respect, how he remained calm even when small accidents occurred, and how he allowed space for others to act, to decide, and to lead. She realized that leadership was not about control, but about care, patience, and the ability to guide without forcing. As the day slowly moved toward evening, the young girl felt a quiet bond with the cowboy, a connection built not on words, but on trust, understanding, and shared moments. She understood that their time together might be brief, that he might leave again, but that the lessons he brought would remain. She also realized that she had grown in ways that mattered. She had learned to observe, to act carefully, and to protect without fear or aggression. The sun began to dip low on the horizon, painting the sky in gold and pink, and the cowboy prepared to leave once more. He mounted his horse slowly, giving a final nod to the adults in the camp. The young girl stepped forward, holding the trinket tightly, her dark eyes meeting his with a mixture of gratitude, respect, and hope. "Will you come again?" she asked softly, echoing her earlier question, but now with a deeper understanding of what it meant. The cowboy smiled, tipping his hat slightly. "If the road leads me here, I will return, and if I can, I will bring only what helps, never what harms." His words were steady, honest, and reassuring. She nodded, feeling a calm certainty settle over her. The trust that had grown between them was small, yet it felt strong enough to endure distance, uncertainty, and the challenges of the world beyond the camp. As he rode away, the young girl watched him disappear into the distance, the dust rising from the horses' hooves glinting in the last rays of the sun. She felt both a sense of sadness that he would leave and a quiet joy that she had learned so much from his presence. The trinket in her hands felt warm, alive with meaning, and she understood that it would serve as a reminder of courage, patience, respect, and the quiet power of understanding. The camp settled for the night, the fire glowing warmly as the children were guided to their blankets, and the adults kept watch in shifts. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the scent of earth, fire, and life. The young girl held the trinket close, reflecting on all that had happened. The visits of the cowboy, the lessons he had taught, the courage she had discovered in herself, and the bond that had grown between two very different worlds. She realized that life was fragile, that people could come and go, and that trust was not given lightly. But she also understood that when trust was earned, even quietly, it could create connections stronger than fear, stronger than distance, and stronger than misunderstanding. She had learned that patience, observation, and respect were powerful tools, and that courage did not always roar. It could be gentle, quiet, and enduring. That night, as she drifted to sleep under the open sky, the young girl felt a sense of peace. The stars twinkled above, mirroring the small sparks of hope in her heart. She held the trinket close, feeling its smooth surface, and thought of the cowboy who had entered their lives with kindness, care, and patience. She knew that he might not stay, that he might travel far and wide, but the lessons and the connection he had brought would remain with her always. In the coming days, she continued to observe and act with the patience and care she had learned. She shared her understanding quietly with the younger children, teaching them through example how to watch carefully, act gently, and respect others. She helped guide small tasks for the adults, applying the lessons of observation, calmness, and thoughtful action in her own way. The camp moved forward, stronger and more aware than before, carrying with it the quiet wisdom of the cowboy's visits and the trust that had grown from simple, careful gestures.